Hello, and welcome to our Built on SailPoint series. I'm Neal Kaye, Senior Vice President of Global Services here at SailPoint. In this series, we discuss Identity Security Cloud product extensions, tools, and processes that leverage the Atlas platform. We deep dive into our clients' security goals with an aim to defend against today's identity-centric threats. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Juli Arvis from SailPoint's 2025 Delivery Admiral Partner, MajorKey, to discuss a fascinating engagement with a large gaming customer. This customer needed a comprehensive solution to modernize their identity program in several key areas. The effort included a full modernization from IIQ to ISC, enhancing their existing joiner mover lever processes and ensuring secure application onboarding, all while adhering to stringent gaming regulations. MajorKey is also providing managed operations support, taking on the manual provisioning and deprovisioning tasks. This allows them to intimately understand their operational needs and identify opportunities for automation as they move forward. So with that, Juli, I'm going to dive right in with our first question. As a SailPoint Delivery Admiral Partner, you build solutions to address unique customer problems. Can you talk about how a typical ISC migration is slightly different for the gaming industry?
Absolutely. And first, I'd like to take an opportunity to say thank you for having me here to talk about this engagement. As we embarked with this customer, we did quickly realize that some of our normal assumptions as we go through readiness checks and maturity were just incorrect for the gaming industry. Like many organizations, this customer of ours had some of the typical challenges that we would see with any modernization effort: resistance to change, selling the value proposition of Identity Security Cloud to their larger stakeholder community, etc. And we were prepared to manage all that. What we were not prepared to manage on day one, that really kind of reared its ugly head early in the engagement, were some of the disparate compliance needs to really accommodate the regulatory implications across the various states that our client deals in. So unlike many of our other highly regulated clients, we're used to healthcare, we're used to even utilities and banking, all of these federal mandated regulations. Gaming doesn't have that. The regulations change state by state and all had to be considered in part of our comprehensive modernization.
I got to tell you, that's really interesting. When I think of large modernization programs that are highly regulated, we often see things like cross-country regulations, especially when you get into Europe and you have GDPR and things like that. But to think about it on a state-by-state level, I'm with you. That's a very different approach. I assume that meant that things like transforms and workflows got exponentially more complicated and required MajorKey to really take a hard look at how we were going to approach those and how you'd move them forward.
Indeed. I think your expert services were probably cursing our names as we really did push the bounds of your before provisioning rules, as we kind of took all of these considerations into mind as we, moved this customer from IIQ to ISC.
So what challenges did ISC need to address as it relates to their existing IIQ footprint?
So that's a good question, because on the surface, this modernization seemed fairly straightforward. IIQ for this customer had a very standard deployment. Feature parity was relatively straightforward. We didn't necessarily have to call out many gaps where there needed to be change with regards to how the client would operate. That said, as we dove in, more complexity was uncovered with some of these processes. And probably the most striking example I can think of was a use case managing multiple accounts for a single identity across those disparate states, across disparate Active Directory environments, all that had their own federated regulatory environments. This ended up being a significant licensing challenge that we did have to solve for. It was something that IIQ had previously handled via customization, and we we're able to work with our engineers and develop a plan for custom reporting and auditing that allows the client now to manage that use case within ISC.
So when you were doing that, were you able to leverage any of the newer tech inside of ISC to streamline that, so at least there was additional functionality provided to the gaming client?
We were, and a lot of the conversation also came around some of your own road mapping and what this, how the Atlas platform is going to scale and start to accommodate this use case in the future. So in that sense, I do feel like this client was a little bit on the bleeding edge, pushing a bit of the bounds of what ISC does today and what it is already posed to do tomorrow.
It's impressive. So what were the capabilities your gaming customer was looking to adopt, and what were the outcomes that were achieved with SailPoint and the Identity Security Cloud solution?
So the biggest capability sounds so basic, and it does just seem like SailPoint 101. They wanted to get away from manual processes. They were largely, doing manual provisioning and deprovisioning within these various highly regulated systems, and they could not get many of those systems integrated successfully into IIQ, which is why with introducing ISC, we were able to start taking advantage of the capabilities and even use those capabilities as a little bit of cover fire to start changing process for the client. Because of this modernization, our client was able to diversify their markets for automation. They were able to start onboarding more applications that had previously not been onboarded within IIQ. They were able to manage additional lifecycle states that they had just never been mature enough to adopt within IIQ. So again, even though some of that sounds like, IGA 101, the ease with which they were able to implement ISC allowed them to actually mature their processes.
Julie, I love hearing that. It always puts a smile to my face. Whenever we go into these, modernization programs, it's so fast and it's so easy. And the fact that clients go, oh, wait, this is working really well. Hold on, let's take a look and see if we're still, actually following best practices. Because ISC, has the majority best practices just built in, ready to go. Just moving through that so much quicker and taking the time to do it right and back out some of those bad practices that IIQ, albeit amazing that you could do anything in it, right? The fact that there's a better, faster way to do it, now all of a sudden you've got the time and the effort to be able to say, hey, wait, a couple of small shifts and we can come into full compliance, get rid of some of these manual items. It's always amazing to me to see how clients go through that as quickly as they do.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, so let's hop into the next one. What technologies and frameworks was MajorKey able to take advantage of with SailPoint's platform as the foundation for your gaming customer?
Well, as you're probably gathering, most of this deployment was always about setting that solid foundation for overall governance, as kind of the means to mature the program at the client more holistically over the next several years. Um, Again, it sounds like basics, but being able to use workflows was a major win for this client. Being able to automate lifecycle states such as legal hold, leave of absence had just never even been done in this business prior. Beyond those basics, we were able to really look at some of our own factory model framework along with that of SailPoints to start driving greater adoption across the organization. This client has an aggressive roadmap for how many apps they want to onboard, not just this year, but in the coming years. And once those foundational applications are completed, especially some of the higher regulated apps, we can look at capabilities such as Savvy to further accelerate that motion with them. And I think the last item that they are really going to get value out of, but haven't yet, are really some of the AI capabilities around creating roles. The client was at a position where we really couldn't even look at existing roles because they were so far off. We needed to look at the entitlement level and really do a full analysis. And I think it's needless to say that some of the capabilities that are inherent in ISC are allowing us to do that analysis with significantly more ease than would have previously been possible.
Well, now would be a good time for me to say thank you to MajorKey. You mentioned one of my favorite tools, kind of that factory model migration process. We spent a lot of time over the last year, probably really 3 years, building out our modernization tooling from Identity IQ over to Identity Security Cloud. And MajorKey was one of the biggest partners, and honestly, I think the first partner we had come in and join us in actually co-development of the Lakehouse migration and modernization toolset. So thank you to MajorKey, and obviously, this is a great opportunity for our joint teams to take that to market and really show our clients, hey, we can come in on day one, move all of your applications, get those lined up, get them onboarded pretty quickly, and then to your point, once they're there and they're aggregating, you can start running roles and have, a fairly, full set of a role model built out in hours and not, months and years. So it's really exciting.
We are happy to have fewer spreadsheets in our lives, and having participated in that Lake House initiative, that was a lot of fun. And I'm just grateful that we've been able to continue to partner on some cutting edge initiatives through the years.
All right, so how easily can ISC be integrated into a client's existing systems, and what were the key factors that differentiated the ISC's integration from their previous IIQ experience?
So, as I think you're probably starting to see, most of what our challenges were with this particular modernization, it wasn't the technology. ISC is pretty user friendly. Most of the integrations that we needed to configure were straightforward with either out of the box connectors or a modern API that could be hit. There was no real deep technical challenge. The challenge was really around winning the hearts and minds of the business and of our stakeholders. Um, all of that said, I think the migration piece of the modernization went pretty quickly. We were done in about 3 months, and then we were able to iterate on all of the additional modernization aspects, such as additional lifecycle management, onboarding various applications, etc. And even though all of that capability existed in IIQ, given the ability to do just anything in IIQ, sometimes you can lose the forest through the trees, and it just wasn't realistic for our client to deploy in that manner.
You talk about the 3 month timeline. We see that over and over again, right? As we're going through these, just how quickly you can re-platform, stand up ISC. There's just so many different tools that we build, accelerators and whatnot, that bring your applications across, whether it's Lakehouse and others. It still is just baffling to me how quickly we can get folks up and running and, quite frankly, set up for kind of long-term success just because they can onboard more and more applications and use cases so much faster. But what I really want to do is I want to hop back into that regulation topic for a second. So how did MajorKey leverage its expertise to creatively address the complexities of regulations in the gaming industry?
So I think I kind of alluded to this earlier, but probably the most pressing challenge that we had on day one was understanding and solutioning to how ISC would handle those multiple AD account creation to accommodate all those disparate systems, and to, in a way that wouldn't just drive up license consumption kind of superfluously and superficially. To do this, what we ended up looking at was a custom solution mimicking what IIQ did previously. We took these decentralized systems and processes and then ended up configuring some complex lookups in that before provisioning rule that, again, expert services probably hates us for, but that was ultimately the solution. It was really pushing the boundaries of what those rules can do and accommodate in a single job.
We keep coming up with more and more different ways to use, whether it's a provisioning rule or some other complex workflow that we've got built out in ISC. It's always interesting to see, one, how quickly they come across, but two, to your point, you can go as far with those as you need to. If you have a super, complex set of use cases, okay, we've got a solution for that too. Various different tools and tricks and techniques to take those and expand it out to even the furthest of edge cases. So I'm glad that was one, doable, albeit needing a little of a little assistance from the expert services team, but the fact that you guys were able to get through that so quickly is still just impressive. So with parity on day one being critical for this particular gaming customer, how did MajorKey balance the need for immediate functionality with the importance of building trust in the new system for the stakeholders?
A very slow and steady, measured approach. I think something that's maybe an interesting tidbit is prior to ISC, the customer was so distrustful of their existing automation that every single termination also got a ServiceNow ticket to double check that the job ran successfully. And, that is something that very quickly could go by the wayside. So taking those baby steps and then building upon them for almost a month, we ran the systems in parallel to really build that confidence, because that was the primary, change that needed to make in the disposition of the client. Was they needed to have faith that what was configured was working as expected every time.
I always love going through the testing process with clients and watching just them light up when they start to see that things are actually moving in the right direction. Sometimes, it's planned testing. Sometimes it's unplanned testing. We had a client once migrating, this was a couple months back, migrating off of a competitor's platform. And when we were going through testing, we found out some really interesting things about their data that they didn't know. And they accidentally, went and updated a field that was blank to null. So that way they knew it was supposed to be that way. Unbeknownst to them, taking out every single one of their dev users in their entire platform. And I remember talking to the CIO kind of during that call, because they're like, wait, what just happened? And we explained how their SSO solution worked and why changing this, from this to this, how they had set up their SSO tool to read this column as blank. And his exact response was, yeah, but Neal, did you see that it worked? It worked really well. It was 100% success, right? We've never had 100% success before. Isn't that cool? And you're just sitting there looking at them going, oh, that's a really interesting way of looking at that. I'm sorry your previous system was not 100% successful. But yes, we have a positive test.
Ouch.
Ouch. But at the same time, they learned a lot about their own internal data. And thankfully, we were still in, the testing phase and not in production. But it was quite interesting.
100%. And, in this case, I know I can speak for our managed operations team. They were just happy to not necessarily have to double check every single termination every single time.
That's right. All right. So were there any achievements you were specifically focused on, or any key stakeholder groups that you had to get buy-in from?
So yes, there was a lot of visibility on this project due to some changes at the client side, some changes in ownership of the overall identity program. So as we were navigating, through the modernization, making sure that outside business stakeholders, namely HR, but also the previous owner, were comfortable with what we were doing and that we were progressing in a way that allowed the modernization to be just that, a modernization, and not necessarily a commentary on what had been done in the past. We needed to ensure that we had kind of a buy-in across the organization, and we just partnered closely with our champion throughout the program to ensure that he could adequately champion what we were doing and what he was trying to do throughout the engagement.
I mean, Julie, it honestly sounds like a kind of a textbook perfect engagement. Having that champion, getting them on board, right? Keeping them there the entire time. If you can do it right, it really does just smooth out all the bumps as you're running through. So that's exciting. So, moving on to a different topic for a second, what operational improvements or business outcomes have you observed as a result of efficiency gained through ISC?
So, quite a few. I alluded to the fact that we had a decrease in tickets because we didn't have to necessarily double check every single termination. But really, part of our overall engagement was also providing managed services, or as we like to call it, managed operations, for the day in, day out care and feeding of this environment. The client previously had all of these termination tickets. They previously were doing a significant amount of manual provisioning and deprovisioning. And when I say significant, I'm saying something to the effect of 5,000 tasks a month that were being managed manually. And as we were able to go through and modernize every life cycle state, every application that came on board decreased that 5,000 request count materially. So, we were really expecting that overall, through the efforts of the applications that the client would like to onboard, and seeing an 80% decrease in that manual interaction.
And you guys did that in how many months?
8.
Wow, that's impressive. All right, well then let's, as we're kind of starting to allude, hey, we're improving future processes and making life easier. Let's keep diving down that rabbit hole. So as you continue to expand ISC with this client, what are the future developments you're targeting for automation to maximize efficiency and security?
So from a roadmap perspective, we've talked about this multiple assignment solution and the before provisioning a rule. I think that is something that we're looking to eventually simplify because we know that it's on SailPoint's roadmap. And, that's an area in which we would, welcome the opportunity to kind of revert back to a simpler solution long term. Uh, there's a pretty hefty list of applications to be onboarded, and really we're not doing anything. As strange as it will sound, there is nothing being done today around some of the basics like certification, segregation of duties, etc. And those are all items that are on our longer term roadmap, to kind of not only improve the maturity of the client, but also to allow these tools to do these processes so much better than a human could.
I love it, and I love the low hanging fruit. Tackle the hard stuff first, come back, and all of a sudden, come into some of these things like certs where you're like, hey, I'm going to push the button, and magically everything's going to be ready to go because we've already done the platform, everything's good. So that's fantastic. Talk about some fun wins as you're going in there. So continuing on kind of the future approach, how has ISC positioned your gaming customer to embrace new future initiatives?
So ultimately, I think what resonates most with me on this project is this is a client that is really using ISE for what ISE is meant to do. We're not trying to make the solution do cartwheels. We are governing identities and we're auditing more of their processes, and we're doing it in a very secure way that, even though it is foundational, it is really a significant departure for the client. And I think as we start talking about all of the incredible bells and whistles that are constantly being released by SailPoint, it's sometimes easy to lose sight of, how powerful the tool is at its core in its initial and kind of inherent use cases that it solves for. Um, so just having this kind of beginning of success gives our client so much runway to be able to expand into all of the fun, cool capabilities, such as non-human identities, such as AI. And these are all just growth opportunities for the client as they mature, and for, SailPoint and MajorKey as we partner together.
Well, I can certainly say thank you for the partnership. And more importantly, thank you so much for all these great insights. It's been great having you on today, talking about, some new and different regulations, and more importantly, how easy it can be to modernize from IIQ to ISC. So really appreciate the time today.
Thank you so much for having me, Neal.
Well, guys, thank you so much. This is built on SailPoint. If you've ever got any questions, reach out to SailPoint. We'd love to talk to you. Reach out to MajorKey, one of our Delivery Admiral partners. That is a top tier partner, not just in the US, but around the globe. So reach out. We're always here. Thanks so much. Have a great day.